Thank you, Mika. I do appreciate your words. Exovol replied, his tiny metal sphere vibrating a little bit. As Mika reached out, grasping the small metal orb and pulling it in, holding it against her face, giving the small orb a hug. "Don't you worry about it. We're friends, silly," Mika said as she hugged the small sphere. "Mika, I do not know if you are aware of this, but I do not have a physical form. This is simply a small partition of my being. It would be physically impossible for you to give my entire entity a hug. I am simply too large. I am, of course, able to sense the aspects of your physical contact, body heat, the pressure that you're applying upon my small segment of form. However, I am uncertain that these readings calculate or truly facilitate the purpose of a hug," Exovol said, vibrating gently in her grasp. "Shut up, Exovol. I'm giving you a hug. Just deal with it." "As you wish, Captain Mika," Exovol vibrated gently, as Mika finally finished her hug, releasing the small sphere. "Okay, well, I guess it's time to get back to work. No more time for the pleasantries, when there's of course paperwork to be done," she said as she clasped the small data pad, beginning to flit her way through. She spent the rest of the day there in her room, searching through all of the data points and finalizing her decisions, and finally finding herself a restful night's sleep, even if it wasn't as long as she wanted it to be. Captain Mika, it's time for you to wake up," Exovol said, as Mika began to rouse from her sleep. What time is it?" "It is approximately 8 a.m., the time that you had scheduled for me to wake you." "Okay, I'm up," Mika said as she crawled out of bed, her hair in disarray and looking as frantic as she usually did in the morning, having only gotten about 5 hours of sleep. She was lackluster for energy as she crawled out of bed, but still, she drug herself out of it, pushing herself along for her second day of being captain and having an official crew, taking care of the minor tediums of getting ready for the day and dressed, before exiting her room aboard Exovol. But as she went to head for the stairs, for a moment she was taken off balance by the fact that there was no longer a simple stairway. Now there appeared to be a door, an electronic one. "What in the... Exovol, where's the stairway?" "Oh, I neglected to inform you. Some of the materials began to arrive sooner than expected. As such, modifications have already begun. The first modification was the lift system that will allow easy transport around the ship. I have more than tripled in size at this point. The engineers already included the schematics, and with materials available, I was able to complete the shift system. The transport lift will take you to whatever destination you designate. It is not fully operational yet, and will only connect you to specific portions of the ship. However, the bridge, docking bay, and engine core and primary corridor are all accessible through this lift system. Unfortunately, we still have to rely on basic stairwells and passageways, crawl paths, in order to gain access to the other segments, for the moment. I hope this isn't an inconvenience," Exovol said. No, not at all," Mika replied. "Don't you ever sleep?" Mika said, as she looked over, seeing once again Exovol's small spherical form floating beside her. No, Mika. I am a piece of technology. I don't sleep. Yeah, well, I should have guessed that, Mika said, trying to straighten her hair a bit. As she approached the doorway to the lift, and it automatically opened up. As she stepped inside, main corridor, Mika spoke aloud, as she felt the lift begin to move after the doors closed tightly. There in the lift, with Exovol's orb form floating beside her, she tried to straighten herself up as much as possible. Mika, many of the crew members have already begun to arrive for their duties. They are currently outside of the ship, awaiting further instructions, along with the specific ship commanders that you've chosen. I have to say, Mika, based on the data provided, you've made some interesting choices. Nonetheless, the commanders are all in attendance and awaiting your instructions. I'm looking at them in the docking bay now. Oh, and for ease of movement, I have also created a series of lift pallets. Basically, these transportation panels will allow members to move about the ship, the exterior of it, in order to get on board and off board the ship quickly, without having to travel the network of catwalks that facilitate most of the docks. This will accelerate the process of my reconstruction. Well, haven't you been a busy bee? Mika replied, as she finally finished up on her little bits of tidying up, and the doors to the lift opened, leaving her a view of the main corridor. As she walked out, she was surprised at the level of change that had occurred. The design was completely different than it was the day before. Wow, you really have been getting some work done, Mika said, as she began to walk down the corridor in the direction of the exit to the ship itself. Yes, it was necessary to begin work before the ordered materials arrived. So, the interior of the ship has already been retrofitted and reorganized to fit the new design changes, at least most of the way. However, at this point, large amounts of the missing ingredients or elements needed to facilitate this process have already begun to arrive, and I am currently integrating them into the systems. However, there is a large amount of it, but it is not a problem. According to my data projections, the reconstruction process should be complete 3 hours before we are scheduled to leave. That is, if the biological workers that you have hired are capable of keeping up. I am uncertain of their sustainability. However, it should not drastically affect the timeline, Exovol said, as Mika exited the outer doors of Exovol's form, stepping onto a walkway that had been altered. Now, to each side of the walkway, there being a panel with foot locking mechanisms, in places that one could place their feet, and that they would be gently held as the panel moved. Mika, without hesitation, trusting Exovol implicitly, stepped onto the panel and was quickly rushed away from the walkway. As she flew by the exterior of the ship, she saw that Exovol was not lying. The size of his form had vastly increased. The only problem being that currently he was still missing very large segments of armor plating and many other exterior systems, a side effect of the expansion and needing to have those gaps filled. But it was astonishing all the same to look at, as the panel she was standing on rushed towards the entry area of the docking bay, where the construction would begin. As she approached, she saw the gathering of new crew members, all now bearing their new uniforms. And there, at the front of the crowd, the commanders that she had chosen